The proper role of government, or subtitle this, Missing Donald Trump. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Shirley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. You know, the more days wear on, the more the weeks pass by, the more conservatives are missing Donald Trump. And you know what? I actually think the more independents and even some Democrats are missing Donald Trump because, like few other presidents in modern history, Donald Trump knew where the reins of power in America belonged. And before I get into all that, I want to quickly mention that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for faith-based podcasts. You can also get Bold and Blunt at washingtontimes.com or wherever podcasts are offered. If you want it at washingtontimes.com, go ahead and sign up for a subscription to my Bold and Blunt podcast. Just go to the newsletter section, find my name, click on it, and put in your information, and you will get my newsletter. It comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It contains all my commentaries that I write all day long at the Washington Times, along with my twice weekly Tuesdays and Thursdays podcasts. It's something you don't want to miss. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you. Thank you so much. Listen to this. This was Donald Trump at the Celebrate Freedom concert in Washington, D.C. in July 2017. It is worth revisiting because it's worth reminding not just our political leaders, but all of Americans what the proper role of government in America really is.
For too long, politicians have tried, oh, have they tried, to centralize authority among the hands of a small few in our nation's capital. I see them all the time. Bureaucrats think they can run over your lives, overrule your values, meddle in your faith, and tell you how to live, what to say, and where to pray.
That's exactly what Democrats do, is it not? This is the Democrat way of politicking. Tell American citizens what to do, how to behave, what to think, how to parent, and more importantly, what not to do, what not to say, what not to think. Democrats are pretty much all that ails America, if you want the truth of it.
But we know that parents, not bureaucrats, know best how to raise their children and create a thriving society.
Parents have the rights, not government. How true.
And we know that families and churches, not government officials, know best how to create a strong and loving community.
Family, the foundation of society. Churches, the bedrock of American liberties. And listen to this final remark. Arguably the most important remark Donald Trump has made, either as president or as private citizen, because this tells all about American exceptionalism. It tells all also about Trump's understanding of American exceptionalism, which he fully understood.
And above all else, we know this. In America, we don't worship government, we worship God.
That's it. That's the foundation right there of American exceptionalism. Our rights, our individual rights come from a creator. We hold those truths to be self-evident, that we are endowed by our creator with certain unalienable rights, among life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and that government is only put in place to preserve and protect those rights. We don't need to ask government's permission. Can we do this? Are we allowed to do that? Will you let us get by with doing this? How about that? No. Government actually has to ask our permission if they can do something, if they're allowed to do something. That's what God-given rights mean. That we are born into certain rights. And government's role, limited in its scope, is there just to secure those rights that each and every individual in America already has. That's the foundation of American exceptionalism. And that's why every individual in the world wants to come to America. Because other governments, other nations don't have those inherent birthrights to freedom. They have to wait until the government gives them certain freedoms and rights. And a government that gives is also a government that takes. Donald Trump understood this. Donald Trump spoke about this. And Donald Trump will be, in all of American history, one of the greatest presidents this country has ever seen, because he both understood and publicly acknowledged that. Barack Obama didn't think that way. Barack Obama told us that you didn't build that. Government actually had a hand in building that. That if you have a business, it's only because of government's might and the good graces of government that you're allowed to be in business, because government provided the roads where vehicles can travel to and from your business to pad your business owner pockets. Well, like all things wicked, like all things evil, like all things sinful, 99% true, 1% lie. Yes, businesses in America need to have accessible areas so people can travel to and from their businesses to conduct business. Whether we're talking about physical roads or whether we're talking about online platforms. And government had a role in that. For instance, government builds roads in America. But here's the 1% truth that Barack Obama liked to leave out of that equation. In America, taxpayers are the government. The government would not be without taxpayers. The government would not exist. The government would not be funded. The government could not operate without taxpayers. And where do taxpayers get the money to give to government so government can exist? From the private market, from private endeavors, from using the talents that God gives at birth as means of making money in life and providing for self and family. God-given rights. In America, we don't worship government, we worship God, Donald Trump said. And Donald Trump has said in various differing ways over the years, he gets it. He gets American exceptionalism. He gets the proper role of government and the proper superiority of citizenry in America. And that's why he's still loved to this day. And that's why it's worthwhile to look at his speeches in greater depth, because he brought forth such pro-America ideals and principles that under the previous administration, the 8 years of suffering under Barack Obama, heavy government intrusion, many Americans may have forgotten. So I'm happy to say I have with me a guest today who has taken the best of Donald Trump's speeches and put them in a book, in book form, for you to put on your coffee table and at leisure, peruse, read it, look through it. Better than that, live it. Craig Shirley, he is a multi-best-selling author, biographer, historian, and he has just compiled a book of Donald Trump speeches called The Greatest Speeches of Donald J. Trump. Check it out. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever you get your books. In the meanwhile, he's here today on Bold and Blunt to discuss. Craig Shirley, thank you.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so you have this book that just came out, The Greatest Speeches of Donald J. Trump, that you and Zorine, I understand, your wife Zorine, selected these speeches. What was the criteria?
I was approached by Humanics Books and asked, was I interested in selecting the speeches and writing the foreword. And I was delighted to be asked. I've never been a coffee table book before. So they sent us probably 30, 40 speeches, maybe more, 40, maybe 50. And they asked us to pick the best ones. And Zorine and I went through, and we really tried to get a cross-section of speeches. I mean, they're all good, and they all contain... There's a theme that runs through all of them. They're all upbeat, they're all hopeful, they're all patriotic. Trump in his inaugural address, I'm going off on tangents here, and I apologize, but in his inaugural address, he said he wanted to be president of all the Americans, of all the American people, which is an interesting contrast with Biden's Nuremberg speech from a couple weeks ago, where he denounced half his country, denounced grandmothers and firefighters and all sorts of people who happened to vote against him. He denounced them as being, he doesn't know what a fascist is, because he in fact is a fascist, but he denounced millions of people. Trump never did that. Trump's speech were all thematically upbeat and hopeful. And it had, serious policy proposals and serious policy. We did a speech at the Mount Rushmore, and we did his inaugural address. We did his several, 27 speeches in all. We selected as being the best representation, and then I wrote the foreword, and then Humanics published it all. So the whole process took about 3-4 months for us to go through the speeches and for me to write the foreword.
Now, political watchers, especially Donald Trump followers, watch Donald Trump carefully, and it seems as if half of his speeches, half the time at least, come off the cuff. Are these orchestrated remarks that he makes that present themselves to the public as off the cuff, or are they really off the cuff?
No, they're really off the cuff. I know he departs from some of the language, but he generally sticks to the script. It's just on little stuff that he might go extemporaneous now and then. But the speeches, I think, were given, and they're all quite remarkable. They're all well written. They're all patriotic. They all end with this catchphrase about making America great again. That was in all of his speeches. And you contrast that with Joe Biden's speeches, which are dour, depressing, speeches of a loser. I don't know how this guy was ever elected.
We're all wondering that.
We're all wondering that. It's like, sometimes our children, do certain things, and we say to ourselves, boy, were they switched at the hospital? And we're wondering, was Joe Biden switched at the hospital? Maybe the better thing for him to do is to go back and try to govern from his basement and never come out, never speak, because he's doing himself such great harm. With walking off the stage in the wrong direction and not knowing who he's talking to and falling asleep in interviews, and he's not doing himself any good with the press. They're just more and more they're just tearing into him. It's best for him to go hide in the basement of his house in Delaware than this type of behavior.
Or maybe go back in the hospital, right? I mean,
yeah, sure.
and we have.
He's got a legitimate excuse. He's old and infirmed, and he needs, hospitalization.
Yeah.
Something is distinct about the two parties. I mean, I know that beyond just the obvious ideology,
There's also an attitude. Republicans have a can-do attitude. Democrats have a can't-do attitude. Republicans are upbeat. Democrats are downbeat. Republicans are, by and large, better looking and happier. And I think that's actually something worth studying. Why are Republicans happier than Democrats? Why are Republicans better looking than Democrats?
Yeah, I actually think that, if that adage holds true, inner beauty shines on the outward, that is part of the reason. And I think Republicans, conservatives take their hope from above, from another world, whereas Democrats, largely secular atheists, it's here and now, and it makes them angry. And it shows.
That's such a good point. Let their inner beauty shine out to the outside. That's such a good phrase, and it's true. Has the happenstance of being true. And I wish I'd remembered that, because
well,
this Republican, I won't say whether I'm good looking or not, but I have trouble remembering things sometimes.
Well, you found it to be true with Donald Trump in the speeches that you gathered, because you said at the outset the common theme was optimism and love for America.
Very much so. The upbeat, optimistic, patriotic, can-do, that those themes run through all of the speeches.
Now, what can you tell us about the behind scenes of the speech writing that went into Trump's many speeches? Do you know the names of the speech writers? Do you know the process? Did they?
I don't know them offhand. I can tell you every one of the Reagan speechwriters, and I can tell you about the process by which they did, because there were about 15 or 20. In fact, Aaron Bakshiam just passed away, God rest his soul. He was a Reagan speechwriter and a favorite. But, he had Mari Massing, and he had Tony Dolan. He had all these really terrific writers. And the interesting thing is, Cheryl, is that none of them were professional writers before they joined his speechwriting office.
Really?
And they were political organizers, or they were lawyers, or something else like that. So they weren't professional speechwriters or professional writers before they joined. But they all had a common, they were good, honest, decent people, good people, and a lot of them were very tall too. I can't think of the name. I'm thinking of the two that are right on the tip of my tongue. I didn't know we were going to go off into this tangent, but my fault. But they were all terrific writers, and I know all of them. And it was the best speechwriting shop in the history of the American presidency, and also. Of course, they were good writers because Reagan himself was a good writer. And the way the process worked is somebody would be assigned. Reagan was to give a speech at Notre Dame, commencement speech. Well, it was handed out to one of the speechwriters, and they said, "Okay, you're Joe College, so you're going to draft the president's speech at Notre Dame." And it would go through a process. He would draft it, and then it would go to Reagan for approval, and then Reagan would sit with a red pen and go through the speech and move around sentences, move around copy blocks, send it back to the speechwriter, who would then take his edits and rewrite it and send it back to the president, who again would go through the speech with a red pen, editing, inserting, adding, deleting, quoting famous Americans, famous presidents, famous founders, framers. And this process would go on 3 or 4 times before he actually got a speech that was acceptable to him. He knew how important it was for a president to be a good speaker, because really, Cheryl, if you think about it, constitutionally, the president has appointing senators, appointing ambassadors, sure. But other than that, the president, the founders and the framers were pretty silent on what a president could do. And really, it comes down to their ability to motivate people and lead people, their ability to effectively use the bully pulpit. That really is a president's power. And Joe Biden, of course, he's lost. He's out to lunch. He doesn't understand the presidency. He doesn't understand presidential power. He doesn't understand leadership. He doesn't understand any things that go with being a president. which is why his approval rating is in the 30s and falling.
And which is also why Democrats love him as the president, because he is so easily steamrolled by the far left globalist influences.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, they push him around like nobody's business. With the AOC push, the squalid, push him around and make him, as long as he does it before 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because after 5 he's got to take a nap.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then it's ice cream time. So.
Then it's ice cream time. Then it's nap time.
So I wonder if you could sort of talk about the differences that you found between Reagan's speeches and Trump's speeches.
That's a great question. I would tell you, Reagan's speeches quoted the framers and the founders a lot, and quoted great Americans, Edison or Mark Twain, or great men and great women from American culture and society. That's the one distinct difference between a Reagan speech and a Trump speech. Trump's speeches very rarely quoted other Americans, other presidents. But that's really the only distinction of difference I could find between the two, Cheryl. They were both, I'm repeating myself here, but they were both upbeat, they were both patriotic, they were both hopeful. Those themes ran thick through the Reagan speeches and through the Trump speeches. Just the one difference is quoting third-party sources. Is Reagan liked to a lot. Reagan, liked to quote Jefferson. He liked to quote Franklin. He liked to quote Washington to make his point. Trump simply just made his point.
And just because I know we're running out of time here, but just because I have you on the phone, and Donald Trump himself endorsed your book and made a mention of you, so that was very nice. Yes.
Yeah, that really, I had no idea that was coming. That was great. That was just terrific.
Yeah.
I was very happy. Obviously, very happy with that.
That's amazing. So you must have some opinion on whether you think he's going to run again, and if he did, what his chances would be. Care to weigh in?
He's running again.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. He's running again. Are you kidding me? Is that he ran once when he was a long shot and won. So he's looking at the landscape. He's looking at Biden faltering and old and decrepit, and it's not just about personality failing; it's about his ideology failing. And he's looking at Biden in the 30s, and he's just salivating. He's staying quiet right now and letting the congressional races lead the news, and that's wise, because he is he is not divisive, but he is controversial, and it's wise right now for him to take a low profile. I think that, and he'll be rewarded for that with a lot of support. He's doing his rallies, but he's not doing anything controversial. He's basically rallying the Republican faithful. Which is a good thing to do, because, is that, if you watch a Trump speech, you see, hey, this guy could get a standing ovation in a graveyard, and Biden puts you to sleep in the first paragraph.
Biden puts you in the graveyard.
Yeah, puts you in the graveyard. Yeah. So no, but whether you like it or not, I happen to like it. Trump is our greatest speechwriter, speech giver right now. There's nobody that can even come close to matching him. Certainly not Mitch Daniels Mitch
McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, thank you. Not Mitch Daniels, Mitch McConnell, or none of the Republican leadership in Congress. I can't think of a Republican governor who's inspirational the way he is. I mean, he is. Reagan was the last guy, and Martin Luther King Jr. were the last two guys who could hold a crowd and entertain them and inform them as much as Donald Trump does today. I saw Reagan many, many times in actions, and I saw him incite people to move, to march, to cry, to the chest beat with pride over their patriotism. Reagan got you that way. But Trump is in many ways similar. He's very different, but also the same with Reagan. and Martin Luther King Jr. We know what he could do to rally a crowd and stir a crowd. So, but John Kennedy as well. John Kennedy could also inspire and incite a crowd. I mean that favorably, not
right.
To move them to action, move them to support. So whether you like it or not, I know I'd get a lot of pushback, but Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Reagan, and Trump are all in a class themselves. Obama would be just underneath them. The problem with Obama was he was what I call our nation's first Facebook president. He was skilled in the study of himself, but he didn't know much about the world. He didn't know how many states there were. He didn't, when he gave speeches, it was mainly about himself.
Yes.
It wasn't really about the American people or where he wanted to lead the American people, and he did nothing in his presidency. It was all about his image of himself, and that's all it was. So. I don't put Obama in that class because he didn't communicate great ideas the way Trump does or the way Reagan did.
Yeah, you can't fake love. And obviously, Donald Trump, like Ronald Reagan, loves America. And that shines through. You can't fool the public on that. So
that's right. Yeah. Well, what did Lincoln say, right? You can fool some of the people some of the time, all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Well, Trump and Reagan, those four didn't try to fool the American people at all.
Yep.
But in so doing, by hitting them right in the nose, the American people with the truth, they only gained support and respect.
Craig Shirley, the greatest speeches of Donald J. Trump. Thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt, and congratulations on your latest bestseller.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl, so much.
The more we go through Joe Biden's administration, the more we see how important it is to recognize the ideal of God-given rights, the principle of individualism as rooted in a creator, as rooted in rights that come from above, not from the government. I predict not only is this book going to be a bestseller, as Americans become more and more fatigued and downtrodden under Joe Biden's administration, but also that there will be a reawakening of the need for more God-given individual rights as the focus of political campaigns going forward. Because, as Donald Trump put it, we worship God in this country, not government. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for faith-based podcasts. You can get Bold and Blunt at washingtontimes.com or wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.